Hello, I'm Dr. Elmer, and this is a video lecture. This is specially done for Seton because she requested some information related to Chiari malformation or Arnold Chiari malformation. And so I've made a list of questions to go through and to discuss on video. These will be going on to the YouTube channel, but they'll also go to Seton herself. And so to begin with, the first question that I wrote down was, what is Arnold Chiari malformation? Arnold Chiari malformation is an issue with the back of the cerebellum, at the bottom of the cerebellum, with the flocculi, or what's commonly called the tonsils, where they get sucked down into the neural canal. Now, the neural canal is the occipital bone. It creates an opening in the bone called the foramen magnum, which means big hole. And so the brainstem comes through there, but with Arnold Chiari malformation, the flocculi gets sucked down into that neural canal. Well, imagine it was built for the brainstem, not for anything else in there, brainstem and its contents, but not for the flocculi. And so now it becomes restricted. The next question is, how did it get there? Well, there are a lot of theories. There are many that say that we don't know. We do have an idea that some of these actually happen because when there's high pressure within the neural chamber, that if you do a lumbar puncture during that period of time, it can create a flow, and that flow can suck those tonsils down into the canal, into the foramen magnum. That actually puts pressure against the brainstem, and the brainstem puts pressure back on it, and oftentimes it'll put pressure back onto the occipital bone itself. And so that is a common way. And now, some of these lumbar punctures are absolutely necessary when you consider a child that may have meningitis. That's a life-threatening process, but it's very important to understand that it is a risk of the procedure. And how do we deal with it if it does happen is very important to understand. The next question I had was, why are some people that have this issue so much worse than others? Well, what I have found is that there are many people that have it that don't even know it. Some of their symptoms are very mild, but they cause other kinds of issues. It is fairly common in scoliosis, which has been, for the last 17 years, my major focus in taking care of that. And so, there are plenty of those who have that, and it creates that asymmetry within the spinal structure. There are things that will make this problem much worse for one person than another. If somebody has lost the curve in their neck, they have a head forward posture, losing that posture puts a stretch on the spinal cord. We learned this from Alf Brigg. He was a neurosurgeon back in the late 70s, early 80s. He took a group of MS patients, a group of scoliosis patients, and a group of cord injury patients. He cut off the backs of the vertebrae in their neck, pounded them into a curve in their neck, and then titanium chicken wired them into that curve, and their MS symptoms went away. That was very interesting. And what he found was, when we lose that curve, when we have the curve the way it's supposed to, the spinal cord and the nerve roots have no stretch on them, and so there's no tension. In fact, the name of his monograph is Adverse Mechanical Tension on the Central Nervous System. When we have a reversal of that curve, it stretches the spinal cord and the nerve roots, which decrease the flow of energy, the conductivity of those nerves, the firing of those nerves. But the worst thing that it does, though, is it decreases the blood flow. Now imagine, if you have blood flow in a spinal cord or brainstem, that would be very, very important. And to decrease it would be disastrous, especially over time. To decrease the size, to thin out the capillary beds, to cause them to become smaller when you consider that those capillaries, the red blood cells have to line up single file to get through them. And so if we thin it out even farther, it's going to significantly decrease, and that's where those claudicative or spastic symptoms come from. It's what we call an upper motor lesion presentation, where it has a spastic paralysis to it. And so that is the kind of thing that can happen with the stretching of the cord. So when we lose that curve, it stretches the cord all the way up to the pons, which goes to the cerebellum and that. So this is what a normal curve looks like. And notice too, here's the other piece, the biomechanical piece to the equation is you must have where the skull and C1 are parallel to one another at 18 degrees. So we have that curve, and then we take the skull and C1. They need to be at an 18-degree pitch angle, and that will not only put them parallel, but it will give the optimal opening, the optimal size of that hole for the brainstem to go through it. And therefore, if you have Chiari, getting it from a presentation where the skull is in flexion and the C1 is in extension, or the skull is in extension and C1 is in flexion, taking it and changing that will cause so that the brainstem doesn't have to go around the corner to get there and put added pressure on the brainstem and the tonsils. But it also makes it so that overall it has the biggest opening for optimal sharing of space between the medulla and the cerebellar tonsils. And so, and that is what we do in structural correction. We're working to put that curve back in, but also we're very interested in getting the orbits forward, straight forward, the bite plane straight, but at the same time getting the skull and C1 parallel at an 18-degree pitch angle so that it has the greatest opening and there's no stretch. Imagine even if you had the proper pitch angle, but we had a head forward posture and we're stretching that spinal cord. As we pull it down, it's pulling back against those cerebellar tonsils and causing it to choke and to press against the back of the occipital bone. And so these are some of the things that can make an individual case worse. Now, if you thought that was bad, let's add a degree of difficulty. Let's say that we take the skull C1 and C2 and we create rotational factors, creating a choking in a torsional fashion, which is also very common, especially with birth traumas tending to be when the doctor turns the head, extends and pulls, he creates a torsional lesion to the ligamentous structures and often can lock it in that posture, in that position. And so the patient throughout the rest of their life has a tendency to have that C1, C2 going in opposite directions. We can also have a kinking of the vertebral artery described by Punjabi and White in kinking the vertebral artery and creating a decrease in blood flow to the brainstem itself, which all of those are disastrous. And that brainstem blood flow is what supplies the medulla, the pons, the cerebellum, including the flocculi and that, but also supplying the back of the brain. And so all of those can be very disastrous. We start adding those up, and all we're talking about now is the structural insults. Now, the next question is, what does it do to me? How does that affect me? Well, first of all, it's going to have an impact on anything that goes on within your medulla. The medulla houses your ability to be awake, to be asleep. It affects, which is your reticular activating system. It deals with basic functions like breathing, heart rate. I don't know if those are important to you, but I think that they are very valuable in keeping you alive and functioning at higher levels of function. It also has to do with where am I in space, body tone, the tone of my muscles in my body that allow me to stand upright, and so the Chiari is going to have an impact on that. it has an impact on the flocculi. Now, the flocculi receive information from the semicircular canals. The vestibular system has a receiver for the head that has semicircular canals and a otolith, which has a utricle and a saccule. Now, the semicircular canals, the anterior, posterior, and horizontal, they receive information on rotations of your head. That's what these do, and they take that information from a movement and turn it into electronic signal and send it to the vestibular nuclei. And it works out with the cerebellum in terms of giving you reflexes that keep you upright and keep the tone of your body in such a way that you can stay upright. That's what the semicircular canals. And the utricle and saccule, the utricle feels translation or linear type movements, where the saccule feels up and down. Primarily, the thing that's going to be affected, because this goes to the vestibular nuclei within the medulla, it's sending signals down to the flocculi, or the cerebellar tonsils. And so, often associated with issues in choking of the flocculi are that rotational dizzy, I don't know where I am in space problem. And when you put your head up, you're often choking it worse. And so putting your head up, and I've seen quite a few Chiari patients where they put their head up and they pass out. Say, well, obviously we got a lot of factors here that are putting pressure, that are affecting that body's ability not only to know where they're in space, but keep them upright and to keep the reticular activating system keeping them awake and alert, and that. So that's what it can do to you. But also, this flocculi is connected to the midline of the cerebellum, which controls the muscle tone of your spine. That muscle tone of your spine allows you to have a good posture and begin to have balance and gait. And so that is affected by this too, because they're interconnected. What else does it do? Those things are wired into what's called the autonomic nervous system through the reticular system. The mesencephalic reticulospinal tracts and the pontine reticulospinal tracts receive their information and cause the extrapyramidal effect when you need to move and stabilize your body. You do so through the extrapyramidal nervous system, and you get the juice, the blood flow, the shunting of blood, all the recovery systems are all within that extrapyramidal system. And so it automatically can start tearing down your basic health systems, digestion, elimination, the basic heart rate function. It can have its demise through that system. So, what does the medical community tend to do for this? It's kind of sad because it's very difficult, and I don't mean this from to indict the medical community. It's difficult to diagnose this problem, and oftentimes Chiari patients go undiagnosed for many years, and finally accidentally an MRI picks it up for some other reason, and they find it and that. But the solution usually is physical therapy type activities and some medications, but then also they'll tend to want to do surgery. Now the surgery, what they're going to do is they're going to take and cut out the back to open up that hole bigger, because they think that the hole is smaller. Well, the hole isn't smaller. It's just that we've lost the curve, so we're stretching the cord, and we put both of the pitch angles at an odd position, which putting stretch on those tissues and on the tonsils. And so they'll cut out the back and back of this bone, plus they'll often cut the top three vertebrae, the backs of those, and wire them all together. And I'm not going to talk about the results. If you want to, if you're interested in the surgery, take a look at this, the statistics and the people who've had it. There's a lot being said on the internet. I'll let them do the talking because they're the ones who actually got it. Here's the really important issue. Once you surgery, you can't unsurgery. Once they cut those pieces out, they're not going to be putting them back in. And any solution after that is a surgical solution. And so what do we do differently? Number one, we're going to put that structure back together again. We're going to put that curve back in the neck. We're going to get that pitch angle back at 18 degrees, both in the skull and C1, so that we have the maximum opening presentation for the contents of the brainstem, particularly the medulla and the flocculi, the tonsils. We're going to be making sure that it's in its proper position in terms of rotational factors, so there's no choking between the skull C1 and C2, so that it's not getting choked down in that way. Then we're going to be working with the neurological side, causing those flocculi to start functioning again, causing the balance system to start functioning, getting the tone of the postural muscles to start functioning again in the proper way. We do so with very clever weighting systems, and that we'll be doing more videos relating to how we do that kind of work. But that's the answer that we do, which allows the patient to change over time so that they can take care of themselves. I hope that answers some questions on what Chiari is and why sometimes it's worse with some people than others, and a little bit about what the medical community and what we do. Hope you have a wonderful day.